Good morning. Will the Committee on Energy, Environment, and Sustainability please come to order? It is 9:03 a.m. on September 25th. I'd like to welcome Councilmembers Tupola and Toba to the chamber. I know Vice Chair Dos Santos Tam is on his way. Pursuant to Section 92-3.7 Hawaii Revised Statutes, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda in two ways, remotely and in person in the council chamber. Remote and in-person oral testimony will be allowed when the agenda item is taken up. As both English and Hawaiian are official languages of the state of Hawaii, pursuant to Article 15, Section 4 of the Hawaii State Constitution and Section 1-13 of the Hawaii Revised Statutes, members of the public may testify in either language. For oral testimonies offered in Olelo, Hawaii, additional time as may be necessary will be allowed for the testifier to provide an English translation of their testimony if they so wish. Before testifying, each person shall state their name. Each speaker may not have anyone else read their statement and is limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. All persons who have registered to testify remotely by video conference or phone will be called upon first. When your name is called, please monitor your screen and activate your audio feed when prompted. I will then give persons who have not registered an opportunity to offer testimony. Please utilize the raise hand feature in Zoom to be called upon. For those who are joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. I will then identify the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your phone number is called, please press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Some friendly reminders and tips. Please video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you're also watching the proceedings on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you're called to testify. When the timer on the screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. Once the remote testifiers have testified, I will proceed to in-person testimony in the council chamber. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to speak following the oral testimonies of the registered speakers. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings to be conducted by roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, I would otherwise call for objections, and if there are any, I will call for a roll call vote. However, I do note that today's meeting is an informational briefing. For those council members participating from outside the council chamber who we don't have at this time, but if they log on in accordance with Section 92-3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audiovisual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you'll be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones, and we'll go to the first item for action, informational briefing, presentation by the Department of Planning and Permitting on the North Shore Sustainable Communities Plan. Joining us in the council is Franz Krentz from the Department of Planning and Permitting, who will be providing a brief presentation. For your information, the presentation is available online, is Departmental Communication 710-2025, and I believe that was distributed to the committee. We'll go ahead and turn it over to our guests today if you want to introduce yourself and proceed. Mahalo.
Thank you. Aloha and good morning, Chair Wire and members of the Energy, Environment, and Sustainability Committee. My name is Franz Krentz. I'm Branch Chief for the Community Planning Branch within the Planning Division of the Department of Planning and Permitting. We're here this morning to provide you a briefing of where we are in the planning process for updating the North Shore Sustainable Communities Plan. We also want to share with you some of the highlights of the initial draft that we have. As is customary, we've been meeting with various council members, and we met with Chair Wire first, since this is his district, and he requested that we come and make a presentation before you this morning. The North Shore Sustainable Community Plan, this is the second 5-year review or update of the plan. The current one, or the last one that was adopted, was in 2011. The Department of Planning and Permitting has orchestrated a new look, a new format for the plan so that they are more graphic rich, user-friendly, and action-oriented. Primary Urban Center Development Plan was the leader in that, and you adopted that earlier this year. And I might make mention that it received an award from the Hawaii chapter of the American Planning Association. This is the second plan that's being updated in this format. The third will be Waianae, and then followed by the EVA DP. But right now, we are focusing on the North Shore Sustainable Communities Plan. We have a public review draft that's gone out for a 60-day comment period that started on September 15th. And we have broadcast and made notice of this in a very wide arena through social media, press releases. Just last Tuesday, the mayor's rep provided the announcement that this is available for review and comment at the neighborhood board meeting. We've also posted it at the Waialua Library, and we have sent out to our list of governmental agencies and community organizations for requests for comment. The public review draft is a culmination of a tremendous multi-year effort led by a Citizens Planning Advisory Committee, which represented a very wide cross-section of the community. All told, all told, there were 10 policy workshops with the Citizens Planning Advisory Committee, and the extensive community engagement included 1,200 survey responses that we received back out of 5,200 mailouts. That's a pretty good return for surveys, which kind of is telling that the community is very involved and passionate about their community. We had 24 stakeholder and community leader interviews, as well as other community workshops. Next Tuesday night on September 30th, we are going to have our third community meeting out at Waialua Elementary School in the cafeteria there from 6 to 8 p.m. Before you is a timeline of the planning process now. Right now, we're in the 60-day comment period, as I mentioned, of the public review draft. We had the announcement at the neighborhood board last Tuesday. We're having this committee meeting today. The third community meeting is on the 30th, as mentioned. And we hope to have a pop-up event, a more informal outreach in the community, but out towards Sunset Beach, Pupukea area, sometime in October, although the details have yet to be figured out at this point. Following the conclusion of the comment day period, which is November 14th, staff will begin to incorporate the comments into the plan as best as possible through revisions, making tweaks and necessary changes as possible. We hope to have the draft final of that plan before the neighborhood board at their meeting in January. Assuming we get a favorable response from the North Shore Neighborhood Board, we'll be forwarding the draft final to the Planning Commission in early spring, probably February or March timeframe, if all goes well. Following their deliberations, which we estimate will be probably a couple meetings at least, then their recommendation will be forwarded to the City Council, we believe probably by early summer. The next slide is just an example of the flyer that was sent out notifying the public about the community meeting. There also is the QR code and scan to the project website, northshorescp.com. Again, the public is invited to access that and register their comments there. So by now, you're probably asking, well, what are the big issues facing the North Shore since the last plan update? Well, as you might expect, climate change is really on every district's mind at the moment, with the associated coastal erosion, flooding, wildfires, and such. We almost hear about the frequency of these happening more and more. Tourism, it's been estimated that there's been an increase in tourism. Through a survey conducted by the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, they estimate that, while it's difficult to pinpoint, they estimate that about 12,000 visitors to the state actually visit the North Shore. From what we've been able to gather, we calculate that that's about a 33% increase since 2011. And then finally, the promotion of diversified agriculture. With the loss of the sugarcane plantations and the downsizing of the pineapple industry, diversified agriculture has received a more impetus, and the plan seeks to boost that level of diversification as well as production. So what does success look like in the coming decades for the North Shore community? Well, they want to, of course, maintain scenic open spaces, have a residents-first approach to tourism. Agriculture is thriving and diversified. Coastal waters, beaches, parks are well managed and linked by a network of bicycle and pedestrian paths. Mountain areas are well managed with watersheds and healthy forests. And residents continue to have a strong connection and sense of community, as well as clean and pristine natural resources. What are some of the big ideas in the plan that address these issues? The first that I want to highlight is a proactive approach to climate change. Here we're talking about proactively planning for the advent of climate change, re-envisioning what coastal areas and floodplains should look like and the change of development patterns, whether it's managed retreat or hardening in place. And then, of course, engaging the community in identifying near and long-term adaptation pathways. The next big idea in the plan is the residents-first approach to tourism. And this is attempting to manage the tourism impacts to minimize the disruption to the community, to infrastructure, and to natural and cultural resources. This may include managing the volume and impact at the heavily visited areas on the North Shore. And then promoting regenerative tourism that aligns with the community's vision, values, and rural character. Volunteerism comes to mind as an example of that. The third big idea is having resilient infrastructure and developing this to adapt to the changing climate. Appropriately siting solar and alternative energy generators, implementing green infrastructure and other nature-based solutions where possible to mitigate the impacts of development. And then as for transportation, expanding the alternative transportation routes such as the coastal path that was mentioned for pedestrians and bicyclists, realigning Kamehameha Highway where necessary to buffer against sea level rise, and then looking into developing and implementing an actual shuttle system that would transport visitors along the North Shore. The next big idea, and this is really a continuation, I would imagine, is maintaining vibrant country towns by celebrating Haleiwa and Waialua as the main commercial districts on the North Shore. This also ensuring that there's a compatible mix of residential, commercial, civic, and light industrial uses, as well as looking into the update of the existing Haleiwa and Waialua town master plans to help preserve their historic small town character. And then finally, economic diversification. This is a little bit of a play on the agricultural diversification in the sense that with agricultural diversification, there could be more jobs created. But a diverse economy that aligns with the rural character of North Shore. Expanding the services and infrastructure that will help support entrepreneurs and remote work, that is working from home. And then supporting the maintenance and growth of the Kauaiapai Airfield or Dillingham Airfield as a hub for local aviation businesses. So underlying the plan's framework are these guiding principles. And I'll just quickly run through them. Managing development, enhancing neighborhood character, providing appropriately sized infrastructure, promoting multimodal transportation, providing high-quality parks and outdoor spaces, preparing for climate change and sea level rise, integrating sustainable practices, preserving historic and cultural resources and heritage, care for water and natural resources, promoting a diversified agricultural industry, expanding economic opportunity, enhancing the region's educational potential, and increasing agency coordination. These shape the North Shore Sustainable Community Plan's goals and policies with the intent of ensuring that the plan aligns with the values and outcomes that are most important to the community. The plan is organized into 11 chapters, each addressing a different element of life on the North Shore. And again, it's a little bit small to read on screen, but the 11 chapters start with open space and natural environment, residential, country towns and commercial areas, 4, agriculture, 5, parks and recreation, 6, mobility and connectivity, 7, energy, 8, tourism management, 9, climate change and natural hazards, 10, water resources, and 11, public services. Each chapter includes a discussion of key outcomes envisioned for that topic, followed by goals, policies, and actions that will be used to measure the success of the plan. And this slide just shows kind of example of the opening of one of the chapters. In this case, it's the open space and natural resources. You'll see a summary of the key outcomes and then a list of goals to accomplish those outcomes, followed by the actual policies for each of those goals. And then this slide shows more discussion of the actual policy with action items, including the partners and timeline in which to accomplish them. And then finally, this should be no stranger to those who've looked at previous plans. This is the future land use map. And it hasn't changed much since the 2011 one, in an effort, of course, to maintain the Sustainable Communities Plan principles and goals. The only thing that you might notice that it changes an adjustment to the community growth boundary for the mill camp project in Waialua. So with the chair's permission, I'll be happy to entertain any questions about where we are in the planning process.
No, mahalo for that. And I do have some questions. If there are any initial questions, seeing none, I'll go ahead and dive into mine. And did you ever? Oh, okay. And then would also welcome Councilmember Dos Santos Tam to the chamber as well. And appreciate the presentation, all the work that's been put in. Like you said, a lot of community input, and then it's still ongoing. And so look forward to the upcoming meeting as well. Just to kind of start at the lower level and then, or at the beginning. So I think you said this is the second 5-year review. Okay, from the 2011 plan. So could you just kind of walk us through so folks understand, because that's a big gap of time too, right? So how does the process typically work out in terms of, seems like it takes more than 5 years to kind of materialize a plan. I know that was the case with Kolaloa too. Is that just through the process of community input, or are there other factors that go into that process?
For this round for North Shore, it started off very robustly. It was continual meetings like every 2 months. But as you imagine, 10 of those meetings would take almost 2 years. We did it. I would imagine we did have a little bit of COVID slowdown during that time period. And then the most recent gap in time was really an adjustment, I think, on various staff levels and really getting it, the draft plan to a point that it's presentable at this stage. So I think there was some revisions, some back and forth, and it just took that amount of time. We are looking, with the council's favor, of actually, rather than every 5 years in that review, looking to more of a 10-year time frame, only because it does take that amount of time to get these prepared.
Appreciate that. And then maybe if you could just, concisely go over how this plan functions. If, say, the community is looking at it, but then they're also looking at underlining zoning, they're looking at projects coming up in the community. How do these work together and, function in terms of the process of deciding what types of projects are going to come up or how particular parcel is going to be used?
That's a good question, and actually will be one of the part of the presentation that we have at the community meeting is to inform the public about how the three-tier planning system works, in the sense that where you have the Oahu General Plan, which is much broader. It's really starting at these kind of high elevation points where the general plan is very, the 10,000 foot level look at it. The regional plans get more and drafted and crafted and tailor-made to the community because it's based more on specific community interests, values, and how they view and aspire, have aspirations for their community. And then finally, to implement that or to help regulate that is the land use ordinance. And so that's really, this is not a regulatory document, it's more policy to ideally help decision-making on development projects. But the land use ordinance is much more regulatory and site-specific, parcel-specific.
Perfect. No, appreciate that. And then not all communities have a sustainable communities plan. There's other types of plans too that maybe apply.
Well, we have two development plans, which in essence is the same type of thing, but which is more focused on development of that area, whereas this is more maintenance or enhancing the current rural character for the rest of the island. Beyond that, there are special area master plans. We talked about the Haleiwa and Waialua ones. Those are rather aged right now. They could use that update, and that's one of the recommendations in the plan to pursue.
So, and then segueing into that, so what would that master plan process look like in terms of revisiting, looking at it, discussing it?
Not much different. I think like we have with these projects, we'll have a consultant on board that can lend specific expertise to that area. I would think in the special area plans, we're gonna have more design, urban design descriptions and standards for how buildings, public spaces, and things like that should look. Whereas we don't quite get into that at this level, but those special area plans should align with the overall emphasis that's in the Sustainable Communities Plan.
Appreciate
so they
that.
should all work together.
Perfect. And then is there a timeline yet for that, or that's just kind of in the beginning phases in terms of the master plan discussions?
Yes, that idea has not been broached yet to council, nor has funding been allocated for it.
Okay. Wanting to just clarify, you had mentioned 12,000 visitors. Was that per, what was the
Per
time?
day.
Per day, that's what I thought. Okay, I just didn't catch that part. And then when we're looking at diversified agriculture, could you share a little bit more just about what that looks like? And I'll even weave in just the broader discussion. I mean, you also talked about appropriately placed solar. You've talked about the need for regenerative tourism. Do you have any more in-depth analysis or discussion of what that looks like and what kind of ideas came up?
I'll try. I mean, that's pretty broad ranging, and of course, those that are involved in the industry are going to know much more than I could possibly try to explain. But as you know, there's at least we get a lot of inquiries about what can folks do to make it easier for them to farm, to get involved in agriculture. And that could be a regulatory thing, but it also could be working with other agencies such as the State Department of Agriculture, like how do we boost these things? How do we make it easier for those individuals who want to continue farming? As we, I think, all know, it's very expensive, it's very time consuming, and it's really a love for what they do. I think as well that's on top of everyone's mind is the idea of food security, right? How do we grow and produce more locally? So not only are we helping those who are active in that industry, but we're also helping the rest of the community by feeding them more nutritional and locally grown produce and food. As for the energy sector, unfortunately, what we hear is that there's quite a competition for flatter lands, right? Which is obviously, not obviously, but those are some of the ones that are more prone or conducive to agriculture as well. So we've been, and with those who are this is the solar folks, looking into the combination of both solar as well as agriculture, they call it agrivoltaics, where in the vicinity of a solar farm or solar panels, whether it's livestock or actual crops, and low growing crops, of course. And there's been an experimental effort up in Mililani that is so far is demonstrating the viability of doing that, of producing agriculture and that. So it's really a combination of those two things to make both work or win-win.
Yeah. And just quickly, I know you're not necessarily the expert or involved in the project, but with the one in Mililani you're talking about, is that more than just sheep, or is there active ag going on? And I guess I ask because I think there's a combination of thoughts in the community. I think everyone wants sustainable agriculture, everyone wants to meet our renewable energy needs, and then there's also concerns about what does the impact on the community look like. And so as we have those conversations over the next, I would say, years, right? But do you have any thoughts or exposure or insight into what is going on in that realm?
In terms of the livestock and the grazing and of animals underneath and around the panels?
Or farming, because I know there's different type of technical designs that could incorporate different types of activities. But I guess in your research and just analysis, have you seen it being implemented effectively or actually producing active ag?
The reports we get back are that they are, but more the livestock. I can't speak to the growing of crops underneath them yet, because that's still experimental. But the Mahi Solar project was one where, in Kunia, which is one where, in fact, I think they helped fund this experimental plot up in Mililani. And they were very adamant about including that in their design of their solar panels for that project. Unfortunately, that's not off the ground yet, but it's been permitted through special use permit, and they have a certain time period in which to bring that online.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we've gotten all different types of feedback on the growth boundary and housing and projects from folks in North Shore, folks in Kunia that are doing ag work. And coming into the discussion you mentioned on the shift in the growth boundary, this is kind of my last few questions, and then I'll open it up to, you had mentioned adjusting to allow for Wailua Mill Camp or contemplate Wailua Mill Camp. And then I noticed, I'm sure you're aware, there's been discussions about the property in Haleiwa town. And so maybe just one, when something is within the growth boundary, what exactly does that mean? And then two, in addition to Mill Camp, are there additional properties or discussions that went on about where new housing could be appropriately placed?
I think the Mill Camp project was one that, because of the number, I think the community was satisfied with that. I don't think they were looking at any other specific locations for housing, but the community was very adamant about maintaining the community growth boundary, where inside the growth boundary, I think everyone understands that that's potentially okay for development, depending on make sure it's fit the character of the neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. But they really didn't want to see anything go outside. And within the community growth boundary, there probably are certain parcels that are conducive to agriculture. And if I might say, the Haleiwa Backyards one really wasn't. It's a remnant from the field before, but it's been cut off by the highway and was used as a staging area. And right now, I think it's been used somewhat informally as a dumping ground. And the owner's not interested in the farming at this time. But there are agricultural plots within Haleiwa that we would support maintaining as agriculture because it's in active production.
Appreciate that. And then I know we received the communication from MDO's office that the HLM is looking into potential uses for the backyards property specifically. Housing was one, but then in addition, after we had conversations with the city, other public services were contemplated in terms of the evaluation, maybe police substation, core services, other types of uses. Are those all things that would kind of fall within a growth boundary? Not exclusively housing, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yes. On that particular site, it really was a two-part process. One was to get a district boundary amendment through the state land use commission that changes it from agricultural to more urban type development. That was just the first part, which you would still have to do if you were contemplating any type of other use, non-agricultural use. So that would be the first step. And then the second part of that process would be the change of zoning. And I
appreciate that.
Leave it there.
Yeah, and then I was going to ask, you want to introduce, is this all your team too, just so we know who's here in case there's any questions?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks for pointing that out. First, we're led by our division chief, Dina Wong. And we have 4 of our newest planners. This is the next generation within the community planning branch and planning division. Makai Morisato is on your far left. Aziz, help me out. Al-Azaz is the second, and then Devin Banks, and then Elliot Felinsky. And these were just brought on, new hires in the division as of August 1st.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Mahalo for joining the city or the department and division, and mahalo for the work everyone's doing. I'll go ahead and ask if there's any questions. Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you so much, Chair. Aloha. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to ask one follow-up question from what Councilmember Juarez said, and then I have a few questions for your presentation. When we were contemplating Bill 47 and discussing it, I had to read through all the documents, right? Because it wasn't just Councilmember Wire voting, it was all of us voting. And in the 2011 North Shore Sustainability's Community Plan, specifically in the community growth boundary, it did state that within the community growth boundary, that there could be commercial, there could be preservation, there could be agriculture, but then in other areas of the North Shore Sustainability's Community Plan, it said that this needed to stay country zone, that it needed to have rural characteristics. So when I read through it, there's 3 housing types, right? So you can have your rural, which I think is like 1 house per acre. You can have like residential rural or commercial, right? And the developer was just going for the third one. But I guess I was confused because even as I read the 2011 North Shore Sustainable Community Plan, to me that was kind of conflicting. Like the developer was actually reading it correctly, but then all the other parts of the plan suggested that Haleiwa should remain rural and that we should have this country characteristic. And I don't think we can do both of those if within the community growth boundary it states that you can also go commercial. So is that something you guys are going to clarify in this update?
Another good question. Let me back up a little bit by again, through the change of zoning process, I think there was the chance on that particular project to refine the density. I think perhaps if I were to view it because of the site itself, one might find that it is too dense for that, and we could look at possibly lowering that to be more in character with that area. I think there are elements and policies, goals, et cetera, within this new plan that help try to give a little bit more description of what that looks like. But again, without being too site specific, we've kind of backed off and not tried to do too much. Unfortunately, because we don't have a rural state land use district, to go from agriculture to urban seems such a shock.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And rightfully so. When you hear that and you're in a small rural area, sure. But that's what we have to work with. And unfortunately, the parcel in question retains that agricultural designation. And we had to get that changed over. Whether the zoning changes or not is really the purview of this council.
Yeah, so in this, it didn't talk about the zoning change, it literally stated that you could go rural for your housing, you could go rural residential, or you could go to commercial. So as I read the document, what I interpreted was what the developer was suggesting, because that's what it said they could do. But I don't understand if we're gonna write in the plan, they can do it, but then every other part of the plan says we shouldn't be doing it. So I don't know, this is not my lane. When you guys rewrite it, you guys figure it out, because I felt like it was a huge conflict with the community, because the document did suggest that we should move the community boundary over, which is what we were discussing. But I don't think anybody wanted like 35 houses every acre, you know what I mean? It was like 150 homes, like that's not fitting within the other parts of the plan that suggest rural, which would either be 1 per acre or 3 houses per acre if you're going rural residential. So if you guys can just maybe think of that before we have to have this discussion again when this comes out, because I think that clarification would help us even as voting members, so that when we read the plan, we understand that we're following the suggestions of the community. If you could just take note of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next page, your 1,200 survey responses is amazing. That's a very high sample size, especially for just North Shore. When you said that people attended 10 policy development workshops, who hosted these workshops and what were they about?
We hosted those along with our consultant. The Citizens Planning Advisory Committee was our primary client, if you will. Each of those policy workshops delved into a particular chapter or topic for the plan.
Okay. And then I guess my next question for big ideas, I appreciate that you guys are throwing this out there. On the first page of big ideas, you said to manage volume and impacts of tourists at heavily visited locations. You know, contemplating the fact that this plan seems to be touching on some things that are city related, but some things that are state related, I would suggest that on this part that we heavily consider what city related things that we're over that we could manage. Because currently right now on this island, to be honest, the only place that's really heavily managed is Hanauma Bay. You know, they did this at Hana Point on Kauai where all locals can go, but everybody else has to apply online for a permit. Like, I think this plan should suggest what city facilities, because we would have direct, you know, purview over that. What city facilities, including beach parks or whatever's, might need to have the same thing that we do at Hanauma Bay, right? Because that whole system was implemented because it was just nuts over there. It's still, right? So now there's not as much cars lining up on the highway. There's not an over crowding of people. And to be honest, it's too dangerous to have that many people in the water all at the same time. So that was my thought on that first page. And then on resilient infrastructure, you're talking about solar, but to be honest, like the only conversations that I've heard surface in this council with North Shore community members was about wind turbines. So I really think that you guys should address that, because yes, you guys might have some solar, not as much as I have on the west side. You guys have a little bit, but you guys have wind turbines that I think that should be written into the plan. What is the North Shore Sustainability Community Plan for that, so that moving forward, it's clear what we should do with whatever the choice is of green energy for certain areas of the North Shore, if that makes sense. Then the next big idea slide, you wrote develop a shuttle system, and then also realign Kamehameha Highway. So realigning Kamehameha Highway would be a DOT thing, and I think maybe if you guys were to put in like what their plans are, because obviously they're realigning it right there by Lani Kai, right by Kawailoa Ranch, but are they planning to do it? Because I don't want us to suggest things in this plan that really are never going to happen if, you know, if DOT doesn't have it on their radar. Subsequently, in a different slide, you suggested like the revitalization of Dillingham Airfield. That's also not our property. So I think like if there were plans that DOT has that you guys could include, because again, I want this plan to work where when on a different day when we're taking a vote, we can read it and it pretty much reflects the whole general idea of what should happen there, because I don't want us pushing for things that really DOT or the state is never planning on doing. And the shuttle system, I don't know if that's a private thing or if it's a city thing or if it would be like little buses, but I think if you guys could delve into that. I've heard that idea many, many, many times, but never heard anyone flesh out how that would all happen. Maybe it's what Councilmember Wire suggested, where the lot behind the commercial area is the staging. I'm not sure. And then when you, on the next big idea slide, talk about Waialua as a main commercial district of the North Shore, I think similar to what Councilmember Wire stated, so many people have brought up mill camp and housing, but then I've also heard people discuss housing in Kahuku, like, oh, we're gonna do it down by, where the Hongwanji is, kind of by the, what is it, the mart across Kahuku High School. I think we should just determine it, because I've heard so many proposals of like maybe up behind Kahuku or maybe down, but then the land down is, I guess, going to be too close to the inundation zone. I'm hoping this plan will suggest exactly where future housing should go, so we don't have to fight about it over here. Just suggest where it's best. If mill camp is what everybody wants, then just prioritize it, because that's the majority of what we do, is we discuss parcels and where housing should go. And then lastly, on your vision, guiding principle, goals, policy, I just highlighted stream maintenance. So you wrote in there as one of the goals that improve stream management and water quality. We have a little bit of purview there. So for me, that might actually be a big idea under infrastructure, is trying to figure out if we as the city have city streams that we're not maintaining or that we need to redo. Because if we're talking about agriculture, the one thing farmers can't afford is upgrading infrastructure. I have tons of farmers. They're not going to go and redo the ditch. They're not going to re-cement things. So I think on the big ideas for infrastructure, you outlined solar. I said we should add turbines. But for me, if agriculture is going to be one of the main things that you write in here, talk about the infrastructure that the farmers need. And I'm not sure if you're having separate meetings with farmers and separate meetings with other areas, but it's a thought. I have meetings with just my farm guys all the time to kind of like go through what's difficult for them, from getting feed, because I mean, like, having feed close by is a thing, right? If you have having proper maintenance of streams. So it might help if you're going to make agriculture like one of your main points in this, is to have that farmers meeting, tell them your issues, so that if we intend to increase any type of agriculture or farming, that we're suggesting the big things that they could never do and that we should kind of pursue as line items in our city budget. Councilmember Wire could put it in there, and maybe within the next 5 years, we could upgrade that infrastructure, whether it's access to water, or maybe sometimes for me, people can't even access their land, so we have to like open up access roads so people can get there. But yeah, those are all my thoughts.
Very good suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and echo that. Mahalo for the discussion. Councilor Dos Santos, Tam.
Thank you, Chair. And Franz, thanks for coming, and thanks for bringing your new staff as of August 1st. Separate from this plan, is your division fully staffed up now?
Not quite.
What's left?
The biggest ones, the largest ones, area where we would need most help is in the senior planner area. Because it was difficult to bring any planners in at that level, we took a different tact and thought maybe best to bring up entry-level planners and get them more knowledgeable and skill levels, and really, I hope, engage them in wanting to be part of public sector governmental service.
Okay, great. Well, keep us posted on how DPP staffing is going, because that's of a lot of interest to all of us. Okay, diving into this plan, right now we're on the map slide, and from the 2011 plan, how has the community growth boundary changed or is proposed to be changed versus the 2011 plan?
Only by notching out the area that the mill camp represents. So the rest of it remains the same.
Okay. And then going to the questions about the state rural designation, I understand that under the state's rural designation, if we were to have that apply to Oahu, that dictates no more than one home per half acre. And there's some areas, I think, that are already more than that, in that there's a home on quarter-acre lots and some other sized lots. Is that, if we were to, say, go to the legislature or go to the State Land Use Commission and ask for rural designations in certain parts of Oahu, would that actually fit? Is that something we should be asking for?
Yeah, the closest density that we can find to matching a rural district is where there's state land use agriculture and country zoning because of the larger lot sizes there. And that lower density just fits more of what what anyone might regard as a rural pattern of development or settlement.
So I guess the implication then is there's still going to have to be areas, Haleiwa Town, Wailua Town, possibly even some of the smaller communities along the North Shore itself, where the state's definition of rural doesn't match up with conditions on the ground, Sunset Beach or Pupukea or these other areas. What do we, are they going to have to just stay in urban? I guess that's my question, what I'm trying to get at.
So your question is, do they have to stay in urban? It depends, but I think we wouldn't want to change that. I think that'd be a monumental effort. But for now, to change some of the agricultural areas that have a rural settlement pattern, that might be a little bit of an easier path to take.
Yeah, I guess, this gets to sort of the bigger question of people hear urban and they think kaka'ako, they think high rises. And of course, we're not ever going to have high rise in the North Shore, and I hope we never do. But at the same time, the next lower designation of rural perhaps is not quite appropriate as it's currently defined by the state. And so what do we do? I guess that's something we'll figure out through the course of the plan.
Yeah, if you look statewide, look at it statewide, and this is a report that's furnished by the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, the State Office of Planning. The rural designation is very small statewide. It's kind of surprising, but I think the idea of maintaining as an agriculture designation is kind of that placeholder, if you will. It's the reserve, the most restrictive development type. I think there's the fear that going to a rural might mean that the gate's open for that type of, or that pattern of development. So I think there's some hesitation at various levels, maybe statewide, that limit the rural designation across islands.
And then my last question is, in the 2011 Sustainable Communities Plan, there's a number of policies and guidelines that were actionable that were listed there. I think there's 6 or 7 pages of them, and some of them are to be implemented by DPP. How are we doing on implementing the recommendations from the 2011 plan up until now? This is the same question that I asked for the PUC development plan. How are we doing on those, and how will we, if we adopt this coming year, make sure that the action items called for actually get implemented?
I think I'd be hazarding a guess, but I've been here 10 years, and I think it's kind of low, to be honest. And I think that's why we emphasize the action, more action-oriented in this plan. Ideally, that a planner could take some of this, and not just DPP, but other planners in other departments, and say, hey, we need to work on this. Do you have a better answer on that? Okay, so it's difficult to point to. I'm sure there are more, maybe DTS and DFM and those folks could have a better say into what they've done, because I'm sure whether it's in stream or stream channel, drainage channel improvements and cleaning and road improvements, I'm sure they have a lot better inventory of those accomplishments.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is, we're going to adopt this plan in 2026, and it's going to take us 20 years into the future. And I don't want the city council to be sitting here in 2046 saying, they talked about a shuttle and it never happened. Why? And then we do the next plan and we'll say, well, we're going to have Tesla shuttles and or whatever, flying shuttles. I don't know. But when we call for actions, I guess we should be doing them. And I'm sure there's a number of things from the 2011 plan that maybe we should also pick up and get going.
Yeah, again, I would just echo the same sentiment. I'd like to think that we have some marching orders here, and particularly if we staff up, or in whatever way, as we start working these a little bit more than we have before, because as you know, and as we as planners learn very early on, we don't want the plan to just sit on a shelf or on a desktop. It's got to be an action document. It's a living, breathing thing, and really should be viewed that way and used that way.
Well, for those questions, and appreciate that sentiment. Councilmember Tolba.
Thank you, Chair. Just kind of going off of Councilmember Dos Santos' Tam, all these great ideas are awesome. And going back to 2011, I was like, no, for my own thinking, like, how do we measure success when outcomes take years to happen? So how do you guys, because, if I'm a neighborhood board member and I'm seeing all these plans and I'm putting out all these ideas again, are we just pandering to our community and not seeing things really happen? So I like to know, how do you measure the success when things take 10 years to appear? Like, just something small, but like along the TLD in Waipahu, a lot of the residents want to see affordable housing in this plan, but we're now knowing that developers have a hard time penciling in anything to develop. So how do you measure success?
The best way is to quantify it, certainly. But I think if you have a list of projects and action items, really enlist, those who have the resources and have the expertise in those areas. And obviously it starts first with talking about it, but then you have those leaders who present to the council such as this to start thinking about how to fund it, how to coordinate it, et cetera, et cetera. But those things are happening. I think our Office of Climate Change and Sustainability works with the state a lot in those areas to look at climate adaptation, resilience. We've seen a number of projects like that, and we're included too, as well as other departments on the windward side, both at Ko'olaupoco and then Ko'olauloa. I'm sure there's others, but those are the ones that we're more intimately familiar with. It's a great segue, I think, into aspects of the plan that do talk about those metrics. And there, at least in the 2011 one, there was a section that talked about, much like what we have here, I think, as well as action items and the timelines, who the partners are identified now that we would begin to go talk to.
Thank you, Chair. It's just frustrating because, we only have really 2 terms, and a lot of this stuff in 2011 never heard of, and we have to understand the ideas, and then we have this plan knowing that it might not even happen, and yet we throwing. Oh yeah, I think you get it.
No, I totally appreciate that sentiment, appreciate the response. And I think you did hit the nail on the head in terms of we're trying desperately to meet our housing needs, creating plans that take a lot of community input, right? It's not purely just, folks coming out and opposing an individual project, but the city gave an invitation, invited community members to spend their time, which we know is super valuable, to design a plan. And so I think facilitating more conversations, and I'm so glad you're working with the state, because I think the council in particular would benefit by continued conversations with the state, right? Because I think on both sides of the street, we have individuals heavily invested in housing our community. And so I think the more we can have those positive conversations to talk about how things fit together, different ideas about plans, we can probably come to agreed upon outcomes in terms of legislation that passes here and across the street. But yeah, before I wade too far off topic, I'll go ahead and jump over to testimony. I'll have you on standby. We'll come back to discussion, but it may be brief. I believe Alice Madison was logged on. She may be logged off now. I'll just double check.
Yes, testifier logged off.
Okay, mahalo, Madam Clerk. Just wanted to double check that. And so we'll go to our next speaker, Angela Young, if you want to proceed when you're ready.
Hello? Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Angela Melody Young, testifying on behalf of CARES. Okay, so North Shore Sustainability Plan. So, just hearing from the last discussion about the farmers, how they couldn't afford to develop in Haleiwa, that's very unfortunate for those families and the ag industry there. So, it's a learning curve for those who don't have farm experience. I asked my mom because she does properties management and sales in development of the ag lot, and she has 2 properties that's already gone through the escrow and transactional sales. And so farm businesses need marketing opportunities, and for a state DBED to put its logo on Made in Hawaii Festival is a huge shift in the right direction to support coffee farmers, flower farms, breadfruit, sweet potato products, locally sustainable food systems in the agriculture industry. So, there are large companies making investments, such as distributors, And then, in the Acts 236, 237, to enhance biosecurity, to promote local ag products in the Food and Product Innovation Network.
Mahalo for that,
those
Angela.
focuses-
Appreciate your testimony. Thank you so much. See no questions for the testifier. We'll go to anyone else online. Seeing no registered and no one else online to testify, we'll go to in person. With no one else wanting to come forward, we'll go ahead and close testimony. Just wanted to all the committee for your time, and of course, mahalo you for your presentation. And just to end it, so September 30th, you said, is the meeting?
Yes, that's the third community meeting.
Okay, 6 to 8?
6 to 8 o'clock p.m. at the Wailua
Wailua Elementary School?
Elementary School cafeteria.
Perfect. And then public comment is open until November?
Open for 60 days right now, yeah.
Perfect. And then if they can't make the meeting, they can submit those through the website?
Correct. At the project website, northshorescp.com, that's, you can add your comments there, but also on the DPP website, under the public input tab. That's when you get to that website, it's one of the main tabs there, and you'll find the project on there to register comments there.
Perfect. Appreciate that. Seeing no further discussion or there be no further business, this meeting will be adjourned. Mahalo again.
Thank you so much.